my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, and I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Ouch! Sit on attack. Ouch! Sit on attack. And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Ouch! Sit on attack to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Next song, books of the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts and letters to Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus and Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude and Revelation. Thanks. That puts me on time. I think that should be the last song. We can go ahead and do the class.
Close your lid. Close your lid. Well, my slide will be up there in just a minute. We sincerely hope so. I'm going to, there we go. Maybe it'll be up in a minute. Sometimes the transition from one computer to the other one deals us misery. I'm doing this because I know that I'm going to have a piece of sunlight right in my right eye socket here in just a second. Here you go. I'm going to be disappointed if I can't see that. There we go. Now it'll get up there in a minute. 1, 2, 3. Kind of important to what I'm doing, so otherwise I wouldn't spend any time. There we go. There we go. Normally, if I start mine up, it automatically knocks somebody else off, and vice versa. And it's worked very well like that, but all of a sudden it don't. So we'll just have to deal with it from there. That's okay. So we're looking, as mentioned before, about salt. It's been discussed already once or twice this week. In fact, salt and light are really what this VBS is about, but it leads up to that. You know, our influence in the world around us, how we affect the world around us. And the Lord brings up a very good example of what we're to be like. And it's something that was very relevant to the people of the day, and that is salt. Salt is so important. In fact, I remember chemistry in high school and all that. I remembered a lot of this stuff, but some of it I didn't remember. Like lots of stuff you like and don't like are really salts, like battery acid, hydrochloric acid. It's, you know, sodium benzoate, sodium this. If it says sodium in it, then it is a salt. Now, yes.
I just wanted to see if you saw that I was here and that
Yeah.
I have a mic,
Okay.
in case anybody wants to make comments.
Gotcha. And that'll bring to mind what I teach a little bit differently than some of my contemporaries. I've got a bit of lecture first. So you can sit back, Charlie can sit down for a little while. Because I have to give you a basis on what to comment on, and it's going to take a few minutes. And I don't want to over-science you, that's not my goal, but there's some very interesting things about salt. And I'm not sure that they were important in what the Lord was saying, but they're relevant because we can still draw analogies from the way they come together. Having been there at creation, he knew everything about salt more than we'll ever know. So who knows how much intent was in there. The simple message, as discussed Monday night, it's very simple, is salt is a preservative. Salt adds flavor. How are you going to add flavor and preserve the world around you? I mean, you could narrow it down to something very simple like that. But I'd like to go a little deeper so that you understand what we're dealing with. And I thought it would be helpful if we could see what salt was like in the first century. Because if we have the mind of who he's talking to, maybe it's a little easier for us to understand. Gumi on Monday made a comment that salt never loses its savor. Well, it doesn't. But when I show you a few things, you'll understand what the Lord was talking about. And it'll make perfect sense, I hope. So this text we're dealing with, we'll be reading shortly, is Matthew 5:13. But there are some things about salt you need to know. One, it's natural. You dig it out of the ground. You find it on the ground. It's in the ocean. It's all over the place. It's in dried up lake beds. It's here and there. But there's places in the world where there's not a whole lot of it. And it turns out that a lot of that place, that accessible salt was, in the first century, was not very close to where everybody was. So it became pretty valuable. It is valuable. What do you know? And we'll discuss all these things a little bit at length in a moment. It's useful. It's something not only useful, but it's necessary. It supports your life. Part of you is salt. And you need to know that. And it controls the moisture content of your body, and it's very important for that. It preserves. We would not be where we are today, I don't believe, if man hadn't figured out that salt keeps fish good through the winter. And when he goes and shoots a deer or mammoth or whatever it was way back when that they went and slaughtered, salt kept that meat good for them. Otherwise, there would be nothing. They'd be out hunting and, frozen. Man would be a whole different animal today if not for the preservative factors and not knowing about those things. I find it amazing that they knew this stuff, don't you? Who figured out that salt took care of fish? Yeah, it makes the white. Horace, good point. You put rock salt on the ice, it freezes your ice cream better and faster, doesn't it? So let's go over these bullets just a little more in detail. First of all, it is a natural mineral. It isn't man-made, although it can be. And I'll explain that process in a moment. It's a scary process. I'll explain that first. We'll just skip over it later because it's really interesting. You take chlorine gas. I'm serious. Now, chlorine gas is deadly. Sniff that, you're dead. And you take sodium. Have you ever seen sodium, the metal sodium? Sodium is it looks like lead. And it oxidizes really quickly. It turns ash on the outside, kind of like lead does after it sits around for a while. So it oxidizes quick. If you throw a quarter-sized piece of sodium in a bucket of water, it will explode. It's highly volatile. Sodium in water is a bomb. It is absolutely mean and nasty. Now, if you take, I watched a guy do this, and it was fascinating. He took a piece of wire, and he heated up a piece of sodium to where just melting, it was just red hot, and he put it in a beaker that was full of chlorine gas. And the beaker lit up for about 4 minutes. And when he was done, the little container he had the sodium in was salt. And you're thinking, chlorine gas, a poisonous metal, and a poisonous gas, I'm not going to touch that with my lips. That's not going on my T-bone later on. But that's exactly what it is. You can manufacture salt with a chemical process. It's not advised, it's very expensive. It's crazy to try to do that, to try to make salt. It would never work, but it can be done, just like you can combine all sorts of other things. But it is in its natural state, and in the first century, it definitely was not man-made. It was harvested, either by mines in the ground, which are very deadly places to work, or people would scrape it off the ground, from the dry lake beds, or they would evaporate it. The Romans had these big pots that were about 3 foot tall, and people would go and collect this muddy, briny stuff, basically part of the beach. They would collect all this stuff, and they would stuff it in these jars, and the Romans liked their salt pure. So they would put it in big copper plate dishes with lips on them and let the sun evaporate it. And then they would sit there and have to pick the sand and the garbage out of it to try to purify it, to make it as pure as possible, because just like gold, the more pure it is, the more valuable it is, like your silver. So, and salt, again, was very valuable. NaCl is a chemical symbol, like you care. You're not going to be tested on this later. Sodium chloride, that means sodium and chlorine, like I explained a minute ago. It's called halite in its natural form. So if you see rock salt, that's called halite. And it's something you find in a cave, or you can find in a grave or a mineral. It's a crystalline, bigger form of salt. But it's still, you taste it, it's salty, if you really want to lick whatever has been on the ground for a while. I don't, thank you. No man can take credit for it. This is something God put here because he knew we needed it, and here it is. And it's in abundance. You just got to go find it, and you have to work for it. Like everything that's valuable, you got to fight for it a little bit. It's mined, collected, evaporated, as I mentioned, or in desperate times, there are plants that have a sodium content in them, and they would burn them to try to get the salt out of the ash for those things. So I'm trying to impress upon you how hard it was to get salt in the first century. It was a brutal process. It took a lot of work, and usually it weren't high-paid individuals doing this. The guy that managed those folks, he made all the money, right? So the other things to know, those vast mines around the world where salt is mined, go thousands and thousands of feet under the ground. The ones in Louisiana, I'll show you in just a minute, actually, 500 meters underground. I mean, and they're out there, and they're just big. Everything's made of salt down there. You're in a salt shaker down there. And it's not loose salt like you sprinkle out of your salt shaker. It's more like bricks. It's big slate it's big, huge pieces, and they cut it into manageable size. I'll even show you a picture of that. There's the inside of a salt mine in Wielicki, Poland. Wow. This is machine mine. There's a machine that just goes there and it's got teeth in it. It just eats the stuff off the wall, and they conveyor it outside. But it still has to be purified. There's other stuff in there. So that's still not 100% salt. There's other things hiding in that, and they have to weed that out, because, I mean, what if there's something in there that's bad for you in the middle of all that? Something to consider. This is the same salt mine in Poland. You see these? Where do they go? Somewhere. My slides here are doing a fine job. They're just not doing very well up there for some reason. Didn't that look good? Anyway. Maybe it'll show up in a minute. These are statues that the miners in Poland carved out of salt. They also carved a huge cathedral out of salt down there. The floor tiles, they're very nice looking, nice little geometric shapes. They're all carved out of salt. And everything in there is salt. In this environment, they've been there for years and years and years, and the miners they would be down there for so many hours on their breaks, they would carve things. And it's now a museum that they use. I wish I knew why weren't happening here. Okay, well, here. This is ineffective, but it's better than nothing. These are the big blocks of salt that this guy, and I think he's in Mali, in North Africa, these are big, huge blocks of salt. And when you read about Roman soldiers, or about this word that somebody's not worth their salt, that's because that's how Romans used to be paid. The soldiers were paid by salt. And they'd give them chunks of salt by their rank. They'd get a different weight of salt, and they could sell that in the market, or they could use it themselves. Now, it's not very convenient to put on your steak like this. They have to scrape it off with a knife or grind it, but it wasn't like powdered salt that once it got wet, it was ruined. I mean, you could hose this off and you'd lose a little bit of it, but it's very tough. So it's a hard thing like that. And amazing that the Lord was able to provide that for us, in such quantity like that. But it was so hard to get that it was rare. Here's the other way. Well, that's disappointing to me. That hasn't failed me in about 3 years. Okay. So here, this is a guy who's diving for the briny bottom of a lagoon, and he's getting the muck off the bottom of the lagoon and bringing it up and putting it in piles. So, not easy to get, right? And this looks like the Dunbarton Bridge over there. We have salt flats out there where they actually let the water leach in, let it evaporate. It takes a long time to do that. And it's an expensive process. And then they still have to refine it. They've got to get the sand and the mollusk and pieces of fish bone and whatever else in there. They have to still refine it and clean it. Whole bunch there. Mounds and mounds of salt. Oh, pink Himalayan sea salt. You ever see it in its natural environment? I know. This is just a guy, he's carving a piece of salt like that. So, but that's I mean, the world has revolved around this mineral for so long. So when the Lord was talking about salt to them, he was talking about something they were familiar with, and it's precious to them. Because it could mean, I'm not going to eat this winter if I don't have this stuff. They might have, who knows how many oxen they would have to sell, or how many gallons of milk they would have to do, or whatever produce they'd had. Who knows what they would have to do in exchange for enough salt to survive through the year. So when he says, you are the salt of the earth, what is he telling them? You are valuable. What a wonderful thing to say. You are valuable like salt. Now, you say that to Joe Modern America, Mr. Modern Middle Class like me, I go, what was it, $1.38 for a thing of Morton's? Maybe it's $3. I don't have a clue. we don't use it like that. But to me, it doesn't mean all that much as the value part. But to these people, you are valuable like salt. That's like saying Brother Aton is valuable like platinum, or like gold, or like silver. So he's telling them that they're valuable. And valuable how? Not just because we're precious, and of course we're precious enough that he gave his life for us. I mean, obviously we are valuable in that respect, but you're valuable in my mission also. And this is where we get involved with the class. You are part of my mission. Your part in this is valuable, like salt is to anybody who wants to stay alive. What happens if you have too much salt? Hypertension, all kinds of stuff like that. What if you have too little? You ever see those football players that are just walking to the sideline and all of a sudden they cramp up and do this? Not enough electrolytes. And they need liquid and electrolytes. They're sitting there drinking that Gatorade. Gatorade, it's like seawater. So they need to replenish all of that because their body, they've sweated all that out and it's gone out of their body. So salt is valuable, and it's very valuable to you, and Jesus recognized the value of these people in this metaphor of you are the salt of the earth. So, ever hear about Lake Peigneur? Louisiana, 1980. You really can't see this either. So it was a lake in Louisiana. Used to be. Now it's a lake again, but only because it filled back up. Texaco Oil was drilling an experimental well out in the middle of the lake, and they miscalculated their angle of attack by about 150 feet and drilled into a 1,500-meter salt mine, a 14-inch diameter hole. It was amazing how quickly a 5-acre lake can drain through a 14-inch diameter hole. Filled up the salt mine so quickly that it raised a geyser on the other side on the air shaft that it was blowing water, salt water, was blowing out the other side in a geyser a couple of 100 foot high. The rush of air, unfortunately, nobody was killed or injured. Barges, you know what barges are? Big flat ships. I think it's 5 or 6 of them were sucked down into the hole. And they said they popped up like cork bobbers after everything settled down. They just, once the water started filling back up, they all came back up to the surface. And somehow they didn't lose all those things. Several houses, this one little island of there completely disappeared. I think a 7-meter lake became a 150-meter lake. He says, but now we can deep sea bass. This guy's like making lemonade out of a lemon here. He says, yeah, we get better fish in there now. But all the canals in the area ran backwards to plenty enough to refill the lake. That was 1980. It was in the news. You can look it up online and watch the videos of it happening, in the aftermath. So it's something to see. I won't even try to show them because I'm dead in the water here. But that was Lake Peigneur. And the whole idea is that's how deep they're digging to get salt. It's still valuable today. Table salt, not so valuable. But as I mentioned in one of my first statements, salt is used for all kinds of things. There's sodium, lots of stuff. And it's used for cleaning agents. It's used for just dozens and dozens of types of things. It is difficult and expensive to mine still because, like you say, you've got the salt flakes, acres and acres of land to try to desalinate the bay out here. You get, I think, 1.5 cups of salt, roughly in average seawater in our area for every 16 gallons of seawater. That's not much. And how long does it take to evaporate 16 gallons of seawater when our relative humidity stays around 50% here? It takes a long time. And all you need is one good rain to come along and set you back a little way. So not terribly predictable. It takes fuel and evaporation to evaporate or to dig, so even in a place where you could boil it to get the salt out of it, it takes a lot of fuel. So it's costly to do that. Again, the Roman soldiers were paid in salt a lot of times. It's essential for preservation, so it is valuable, and it is essential for human and animal life. You know what a salt lick is? Salt block, yeah. You put them out in the field so the cattle will get enough salt, and the deer do it. They salt deer to get them out there so they can shoot them. But they put it's a block of salt you pick up at the hardware store and you throw it out there, and they come along and they just lick on it so that they get their salt. It's useful and necessary. Again, you need it to survive. You can't regulate your water, your body water without it. Your organs will fail. All kinds of neat stuff like that. Too much, and it's toxic. Again, the high blood pressure, organ failure. Oh, you ever see those eye wash stations? You know what that is? That's buffered saline solution. It's really clean electrolyte salt water. Great for cleaning a wound out. I have gotten to where I don't use peroxide at all if I get a cut out. I only use the buffered saline solution. It's amazing how quickly it heals. See, hydrogen peroxide kills skin. It kills skin cells, so it always leaves, it's harder to heal, it leaves a mark. But the saline irrigates the wound, cleans it, has a healing effect. If you don't believe me, ask anybody in Hawaii who has a cut. What do? They go get in the ocean. and it helps heal the cut. But if you go to surgery and they say, you watch the surgery show, they say, irrigate the wound, buffered saline solution. That's exactly what they're squirting in. That's what the nurse with the little squirt bottle with the little thing on it, she's squirting buffered saline solution in there because it's safe and it helps to heal and it preserves what's there.
David?
Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think peroxide also spreads the infection as well. So it's
I'm not sure
really
of that,
good.
but
Yeah.
It very well could be. I just know it bubbles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good disinfectant, but it does do damage as well as good, and it certainly has its place. But eye wash stations, that's what they are, because that's the safest thing to put into your eyes. It doesn't recontaminate, right? You call an ambulance, and they decide that they need to stabilize you. They give you an IV. What are they giving you? Buffered saline solution. D5W, I think they got, but it's just buffered saline solution, because they know you need electrolytes to start healing. Your body needs those things, and that's how they stabilize you. So very important stuff today, even, and very valuable today. Even though it doesn't cost much today, it is still very valuable to us. It preserves. Here's an interesting thing. It doesn't just preserve, it doesn't just flavor meat. It actually changes the chemical makeup of the outside of the meat. That's how it preserves. It actually adjusts the chemical makeup. That's how that fish dries and doesn't get all rank and stanky. Although salted fish is kind of rank and stanky, it's just, yes, but it is edible. But it actually changes the chemical component of the meat. It helps it to dry without infecting, without getting nasty. So very important. Okay, so we said it's natural, it's valuable, it's necessary, and it preserves. Now I want you to bear all those things in mind as we talk about what the Lord was trying to tell us when it says you are the salt of the earth. Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, or saltiness, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. This makes a little more sense when you realize that what Joe Average in the first century had in their salt shaker was not pure salt. It had salt in it, but it also had sea sand, and who knows, or it could have dirt. They weren't, you know how you purify salt? You have to mix it with water and evaporate it to get it out. And they didn't have the technology to do that. So your salt had other stuff in it. It might have had pebbles in it. It might have had all kinds of stuff in it. No matter how they ground it, there's something besides salt in there. So once the salt is consumed out of that, you do have something left over, but it's not salt. And it's not salty, and all it's good for is to toss out there and fill potholes in the road. So yes, salt doesn't lose its saltiness, because once you change salt, it's no longer salt. It becomes something else. So how do we lose our saltiness? Well, first of all, there's another thing to mention too. If you have a poison called sodium and a poison called chlorine, and you take one of them away, what do you have? Poison. You have the other. So if you change salt, it becomes poison. It has to stay equal and balanced. It's equal amounts of sodium and equal amounts of chlorine, and any other combination can hurt you. So it's something to remember. And that balance, I think, may be one of the underlying messages that we can glean from this. He doesn't say anything. It's not really talking about that, but it is something else. We know how important balance is in the Christian life. So maybe that's just another thing that we can draw out of it or expand on. Again, probably not what he had intended, but we can lose our saltiness, which would be our effect, our preserving, our valuable effect. How do we lose that? Now we can. You guys with the microphones will get busy. How can we lose our saltiness? I've got 4 or 5 things here, but I want you to come up with them. I'll throw the first one out. Oh, you hit it. Fellowship, okay. Fellowship is important. So when we start depriving ourselves of what God has asked us to do, like he says we should assemble together. If we isolate ourselves from the rest of the body, we're losing our saltiness. How about knowledge? If we don't fortify ourselves with knowledge, well, we can lose our effect also. Because what does nobody want to hear? If you want to study with somebody, you want to talk with somebody, and you've got a neighbor who's down, and you want to share the gospel with them because that's what helped you, right? And they say, well, what about this? And you say, well, I don't know. What about this? Well, I don't know. Well, you're kind of losing your saltiness there. And so knowledge is power when it comes to this. That increases your savor. It increases your value, your valuation as salt in the world around you. Not that if you're ignorant that it's a problem. I mean, there's people that just can't learn as well as others. But Lord knows what our limitations are, right? The point is to keep trying and keep growing and keep that knowledge as part of your savor, right? Yes, Curtis.
A moment ago when you said what salt what effect does it have on the fish or what it have on meat? When I was coming up, we would butcher a hog every year, and my grandfather would salt down the bacon. And so what you were just saying now, it's our influence. Right. We have influence to change, just like that salt change and cure and preserve. We have the influence to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Just about Lord, He come to save and to change. And so as salt, that's what we are doing. We are preserving, we are changing.
Remember what Hosea said? My people have been destroyed for lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge is a killer, and it's going to change our influence. If we don't ever seek to learn and better ourselves with what God's will for us is, then we could be losing our savor. What else? Behavior. Okay, ungodly living.
Ungodly lifestyle.
Okay, our behavior. I think that's one of the biggies. And
that's the biggest.
Yeah.
That we have, and Christ taught that.
Absolutely.
And we better listen.
All the other stuff leads up to our behavior, doesn't it? Yeah, and that's a biggie. Our behavior is the thing that most people see in us, and it's the interface from the salt to the other person, right, or to the world around us, and our lack of knowledge, our lack of faith, are all going to change our influence too. Our lack of love. If people see us as representing God, who's supposed to be love, yet we don't have love, what does that say? What do you think, Charlie? What does it say?
Early thinking, but when you say that, the Lord is a just God, and He chastens those who He loves. So we got to have love in the right mind. He's compassionate, He's loving, He's forgiving, He's all those things. But if we leave out the chastisement, our children wouldn't be influenced by us because we just let them do whatever they want. And now that's what I got to do when I was a kid. My mom said, "You want to go outside? Okay, come back in by dark time." And I said, "Okay." 12 o'clock at night, I was in there, no problem. It was dark, and the police had to tell me, go home. Now that's a child who's don't get much chastisement, no father around. So it wasn't my mom's fault, but it was my own mind guiding me. Hey, it's nice out here. I'm going to stay outside until somebody tells me go home.
Yeah, the love is. I think you said the word compassion, and I think that's where where it's most evident in how we treat other people. The world likes to use this word empathy a lot. There's sympathy and empathy. And empathy, as I've experienced it, sympathy is, well, I haven't, but I appreciate what you're going through. So we have to be able to have those characteristics because Jesus had those characteristics, and we want to be like him. So if we have a problem with that, that's someplace we need to grow and mature. And we do that by practice. When Jesus looked around, what did he see? He saw lost people. He had the ability to see people burning in the afterlife, and he didn't want them to go through that. And therefore, he sees them as lost souls and somebody who needs saving. A guy walking down the street is no longer just a guy walking down the street. It's a guy walking down the street who's lost eternally. What a terrible thing. And we need to put those eyes on when we see people around us. Yes, Jordan?
Hey, I was thinking, if we take the example all the way, is it possible to become too salty as a Christian? And maybe as an example would be like we're trying to shove the Bible down people's throats, or just without going through a discussion about the Bible and saying they're going to hell, or maybe something like that. I'm not sure.
I didn't hear all of it, but
If we can become too salty as a Christian.
you mean rephrase a little bit because I'm hearing about.
If we can be too salty as a Christian.
Okay, now if you use the word salty like salty, a salty old sailor. There we go. I mean, yeah, we could. We look back at the example, right? The paradigm, and that is Jesus. How did he treat people in every situation? We need to do it just like he did, if at all possible. When he saw somebody in trouble that was hurting, the adulteress, the woman that was caught in adultery, I mean, you can imagine what he could have said, right? What's the matter with you? Throwing yourself. I mean, he could have berated her. He could have done all kinds of things. But all he needed to do was, in compassion for her lost state, say, "What? Nobody here to throw any rocks at you now? I mean, go and don't sin anymore. Fix it." It wouldn't have served anything for him talking down to her like the trash she might be. I don't know. But there was no point in that. He treated her with love and compassion, and it was effective because of that. So and I think you're right though, Jordan, we can become like a lot of the evangelists of the 1950s, 40s, and 50s who, the fire and brimstone guys, the guys that, like that, and basically scare people to heaven. And it's that doesn't fly very well today because our mentality has changed quite a bit. People deserve a different tact. Did Jesus get animated and yell? Absolutely. I think I would like to have been there when he was tossing the tables of the money changers in the temple over. I think that would be interesting to see how the Lord handled righteous indignation, which is called right anger. Ephesians says, be angry but don't sin. It's time to get angry sometime. I can take a second to introduce you to Dr. Michelle Swinson back here. Just a sec, because she's going to be doing the thing with the event coming up in the near future. I forgot where I was going with that completely. I was going to use it. I'm Dane Bremaged. I need more salt. Okay, I got a few minutes here. I'm watching the break time a little bit here, so you guys don't get slighted. But I really blanked on that. That is wonderful. I'm glad to do that. Okay. Okay, I'll get to it later and I'll figure it out. One of the other things we need to be careful of that will cause us to lose our saltiness, contamination. Because, these people had other stuff in their salt. It wasn't as valuable if it had a lot of fish bones and stuff in it, because it didn't go as far. So, contamination. So we let things contaminate our lives. We let things get in there. That was what it was about. Vaccinations and stuff like that. Things that there's things that we have a right to be angry about. That when people force you to do things against your will, they say for the good of the world around them. It's for everybody's health that we do this to you. You have a right to be angry about that. If that's what pushes your button, that's a righteous anger. If they teach your kids something in school that's harmful, we have a right to be upset about that. We should be upset about that. Be angry and don't sin. But that contamination, the public schools, everybody, they're trying to contaminate our kids. It's exactly what they're doing. And we have the right, and not just the right, but the responsibility to be upset about that. But we have to do that and not sin. Jesus shows us how. I think he was pretty upset when he turned those tables over. But at the same time, he was able to do that. And of course, the next phrase, what is it, Curtis? Don't let the sun go down in your anger. Don't dwell on it, because that's where sin starts, right? When you start letting it fester. How about dilution? If you got a cup of salt and you put it in 300 gallons of water, the water's not very salty. But if you put a cup of salt in a gallon of water, it's really salty. We let other things get in our lives, that get in the way of us having an influence of our relationship to God. And if we let that happen, then we're basically diluting the power that we have. Just like putting a whole bunch of extra water and stuff like that in. We got lack of knowledge, lack of faith, lack of love, contamination, dilution. Can you think of anything else that has us lose our faith? Angela.
Pride, disobedience, selfishness. Those are the three things that come to mind.
I think I'll put that in the behavior category. Absolutely. Yeah, Michelle has the doc.
A doc. First of all, I just want to say I picked out this sweatshirt. Didn't know what you were going to talk about, but you have got to see it. Seriously?
Salt water heals everything, see?
I have like 40 sweatshirts. I have no idea.
She's planted in the audience. No.
But I think of the salt of the earth as being grounded, right? And staying connected and not being I don't know, not hoity-toity, but just being humble. And so that's what I think of when I think of salt too, which goes along with what you just said. So.
Absolutely. When we think of lack of knowledge, lack of faith, again, all of these are the things that ground us. Knowledge and faith. So we were saying what you were saying, I guess, in the long run. Lack of love. And we step back and we look at the personality of the Lord and we go, oh, if I were like him, I would be all these things. I would have these attributes, right? Did the Lord possess knowledge? Why, yes, he was debating with the rabbis in the temple when he was 12 years old, telling them how it was. Oh, thank you, Juan. Mike Man Juan. Film at 11. Is it turned on? You know, I'm deaf in this ear and I can't hear out of this one, so. Here we go.
Lack of desire to have the qualities of Christ and living the Christian life.
Yeah, I think so, because what does Revelation 3:16 say about people who have kind of deluded themselves like that? So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I'll spew you out of my mouth. You say, yes, I want to live life. Yes, I want the benefits of this, but I want to go do a bunch of other stuff too. You know, I'm not going to be on fire for that. I'm not going to have a desire for that. Besides that, I've got my salt mining business to run. Yes, Ruth. Wait, let him hand you a microphone so the people on the internet can hear you.
I think we have one verse in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3.
Okay.
Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. It's kind of a solution for being the salt of the earth. So it says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. To be the salt of the earth.
That's a good. I wish I'd have brought that one up. I wish I'd said that. No, good. Thank you for that. And when we talk about contamination and dilution, I keep thinking about James chapter 4. I guess beginning, I wrote it down here somewhere. Verse 1. Anybody else want to read that? James 4, 1 through 8. I'll spread the love around here. Dun, 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 dun. Oh.
You said James 4:1?
Yeah.
From whence cometh wars and fighting among you? Come they not hence, even of your lust at war in your members? Ye lust and have not. Ye kill and desire to have, and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war. And yet ye have not, because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lust. Continue.
All the way to 8.
Okay.
Give you some exercise.
Ye adulterers and adulterers, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the Scripture saith in vain, the Spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? But he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded.
Okay, there's a lot there, and it has a lot to do. Thank you for reading. I appreciate it. Has a lot to do with us contaminating ourselves, our lives with other things. And with what Betty said about our behavior and our motivation, as was mentioned also, we've got desire, motivation, all of these things come together. And James kind of rolls them up there. Friendship in the world is enmity with God. If other verse in Matthew, you can't serve God and man, right? God and mammon. You love the one and hate the other, hate the one and love the other. Go ahead, Brother Franklin. Speak up, I'm deaf still.
I like what the scripture said in Matthew 5:20. I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. And then in Luke 18:11 and 13, he said the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give thanks for all that I possess. And the publican, standing up for all, would not lift up so much his eyes to heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner.
And a couple of good examples there still again. You have more to say? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stop.
That show you how a man can do. You know, you think you are more than another person.
You're right.
You'll talk to God, trying to lift yourself up higher than anyone else.
Yeah.
Tearing down someone. You're not supposed to tear down people. You're supposed to be kind, humble.
That speaks a lot to humility, doesn't it? And I don't know about you, that's a hard thing sometimes. Because I being a guy, the pride factor could be there in the way if I let it. And I must admit, occasionally I let it. We have to fight that devil off, because just like that the publican, I'm sure glad I'm not like this tax collector. The Pharisee saying that about the publican. I mean, we have to be careful to fight that guy off. And if we have that kind of attitude as that Pharisee does, what does that do for our influence around us? Kind of stinks it up, don't it? Does anybody like to be around a braggart? You do? Oh, just kidding. Beat up? No, of course not. And nobody, you become unapproachable. I've got to say this about the Lord. While he was physically here, he was completely approachable. Even with thousands of people around him, he was completely approachable. And it wore him out. He was in a human body, and he got tired. And he had to break away every now and then, right? He had to get away and clear the gray matter every now and then. But still, he was completely approachable. Remember the woman with the blood problem that just reached through and touched. Just reached through and touched. If I could just touch. And her faith was great there, but and he realized that went on also. So all of these things show us that the Lord was approachable. He didn't berate people for that. And then you stop and think. Even I think part of the skill of this is knowing how to read the room. We brought this up the other night. Got to know how to read the room. Who are you standing in front of? If you remember, one woman came to him, and it sounded like he was really rude to her. He basically, in that day, would have been kind of an insult. It's not good to give what's for my children to the dogs. Pretty much. It sounds kind of rude, but he knew the room, and he knew how strong her faith was. And he was able to use that, and basically it magnified her. It actually showed her to be a person of great faith by him doing that. I'd be afraid. Boy, I don't think I got that kind of guts to say something like that. You know, I wouldn't want to be, you know, I'm just not that kind of, that's not the way I do things. But how we behave and how we treat people is so important. Now, I'm going to give Stephanie, my daughter, a little credit today, because there's been this person from New York calling where she works constantly. And by constantly, I mean 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And finally, she has lost her tact. And she still, when she picked up the phone, knowing it was this person, she still answered professionally. You know, her face didn't look like it. But her voice came over really well. I mean, she still answered. She said, I know who this is. And I said, it's somebody calling up trying to scam the office. You know, and they keep asking for somebody they know isn't there. It's one of those kind of things, trying to get mine information so they can send faxes and do whatever evil they want to do. But, you know, her handling of that was very professional, I thought. I really appreciated that she was able to keep her cool, because it was obviously eating up a lot of her time. It was very frustrating. And how we handle the person who cuts us off in traffic, and how we handle the person who bumps us out of line at Safeway, the person who grabs the last parking spot, the person that takes up 6 parking spots in front of my house. All of those, how do we handle those things? If you handle those things as the Lord would, with graciousness, you know, giving preference to one another and brotherly love is the way they say it, right? You got to, you know, give honor and preference to them. I'm winding down here. I don't want to start the next little phase. We've got 1 minute left. I'm going to ask you a big favor. This is a huge favor. Dr. Michelle's putting her salt shirt on. I might want one of those. A big favor is when they call you back in, try to get back in here. It usually takes about an extra 7 or 8 minutes, and it's not for me. It's just so we don't distract other people who are trying to get the last. We only have a few minutes after the break anyway, so it was just wrap up and discuss time. But if you can, when they call you back in, put just a teeny bit of a scoot on it would really be appreciated. Don't have to run. but if you do that, be thinking about that thing. If you have any other questions or comments or something you want to add, right after the break, we only have, like I say, 10 or 12 minutes or so, usually after the break, to discuss things. It would be a good time to bring those things up. Thank you for your time. We'll see you in a few minutes. We'll see you when Tim rings the bell. it just does this and feeds it into a conveyor belt. It's pretty fascinating to watch. Those are the statues. They're a little more visible on the big screen than they were on my little screen. But and again, this whole place, it's like a museum now. They've closed the salt mine, but they've got stuff like that. They've got they carved out a church building down there. You know, with the whole thing. It was, I don't know what religion, but all kinds of stuff. The carving on the left was the King of Poland at the time, and the one on the right, I think, was one of their patron saints. It was somebody, I'm not sure. And that's that guy with the big blocks of salt selling them in the market in North Africa. Is that? I have no clue. He wouldn't answer me in English. No, I really don't know. In fact, it probably changes frequently, but it's all about weight. And again, it's not as valuable today as it would have been back then. Back then, that was like, I mean, that could be, a block of that could have been a month's pay for a centurion, or one of the soldiers. So interesting to see. This is probably a lot what it would look like back then, except he wouldn't have near that much there, or he would have been robbed, more than likely. And that's that guy harvesting the stuff off he's actually going underwater and scooping up basketfuls of that stuff and putting it in big piles so they can get out and let it air dry. And again, that stuff's packed with all kinds of other stuff. I mean, fish guts, who knows else what's in there. So it's not purified. So wouldn't want to put some on your hamburger until you evaporated it, probably. But it's just interesting to see that this is a recent picture. It's happening just that way today, just like it has been for millennia. Salt has been important since man was. And there's the Dunbarton Bridge, no. San Mateo Bridge out there. No kidding, it looks a lot like that. It's bigger, and they use a machine to go out there and harvest it. But this guy goes out there and rakes it so that that it keeps the wet material on top, so it'll evaporate better. But again, you're a real big high tide away from losing a lot of that, so it's not a great thing. I just thought I'd share that stuff with you right quick because this little 15-inch screen's not much for the people in the back row. So about dilution still, and I think that's, I wanted to focus on that just for a second because I think it's an important thing. We let so many things get into our lives and interfere with our spirituality. And you find out about yourself by taking something away. I had a pretty good income until last September, and then I retired and went to nothing. And from that to zero was kind of a culture shock. But it helped me be aware of where my priorities were. I love to play golf, but I don't love it enough to not eat to go play golf. So, and it's just one of those things that doing without a little bit, fasting in a sense, is kind of a helpful thing to help us realize what our priorities are or aren't. It's something that awakens our mind to what we really need. Matthew 16, beginning in verse 5. If the projector works, I have it on the screen. Had that thing 7 years, I think now. It's never done that before. So, let's read together. And the disciples came to the other side and forgot to take bread. 12 people forgot to bring bread. Okay, commentary. And Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, we took no bread. And Jesus, perceiving it, said, O ye of little faith, why reason you among yourselves because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? I'm going to stop there just for a second. I want you to build a picture of Jesus saying, these guys come and say, they forgot to bring bread. What is necessary for bread? leaven. It's got a raise, right? Okay. By the way, salt is a leavening agent too, but I'll link it together real quick. But it's the same principle. And Jesus said, take heed and beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. What do you think the disciples are thinking? Just think practical for a second. Yeah. They think he's talking, well, the Pharisees aren't going to supply bread for us. They're still thinking about loaves of bread. So you're right there. They're thinking about, well, what? I'm supposed to go get. I can't bake bread. We don't have a kitchen here. This is so they're kind of confused. So out of Jesus, they step. You can see this is an aside moment, right? They go over here and huddle, and they go, hey, we took no bread, and they're wondering why. Why is he bringing up the leaven of the Pharisees? What do we care about their bread? This is not, So they're confused. But he perceived what they were talking about. So, do you not remember the 5 loaves? Because you remember what Jesus can do with a loaf of bread, right? Lack of bread is not a problem for him. Bread and fishes happen. He can do that. So they've already forgotten that, and they're concerned that they didn't bring bread to eat. But instead of just saying, "Hey Lord, we forgot the bread. Can you help out?" No. But he brings up this as an example about the Pharisees. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What's he talking? Is he talking about bread? Say no. Thank you. He's talking about the influence, because what does that little bit of yeast do in that big thing of dough? It spreads it out, makes it big, doesn't it? How such a little teeny thing can have such a huge influence. Beware of the influence. And then if we want to relate it to our lesson today, beware of the dilution. Don't get dissolved or diluted by the leaven of something else. Not necessarily Pharisees and Sadducees and stuff in our case, but anything else. There's Satan is extremely good at what he does. The devil is the master at what he does. He is the ultimate authority at what he does. He's good at it, or he wouldn't be the devil, would he? He knows what pushes our buttons, and he knows where to come and plant that little seed to cause dissension amongst people who love each other. And he knows how to break up a family. He knows how to hurt a marriage. He knows how to anger a child so they don't listen to their parents. He knows all of this stuff. So we can't stop it, but we can be aware of it and combat it. We need to watch that. If you don't want bread to rise, you don't want any leaven in there, right? So you have to protect it. You have to isolate it from yeast or anything containing yeast. You've got to seal it up, and you got to put that saran wrap over it and the lid on top of it if you don't want anything contaminants to get in there, because that stuff finds its way around. Basically spores. Not yet perceived. Remember those 5 loaves? Hey, I'm capable of taking care of the bread. That's not what we're talking about. I was using this as an example about how a little influence can really taint and poison you. Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, now many, and how many baskets you took up. How is it that you do not perceive that I spoke not to you about concerning bread, but about the leaven or the influence of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then understood they that he bade them not to beware of the leaven of bread, but the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And somebody coming in and teaching something false can be deadly to some, especially if it's somebody with a glowing personality like mine. No, I'm just kidding. But somebody can come in and plant a seed in the wrong, and they can even do it innocently and not knowing, out of ignorance. And it can be an untruth, and it can cause hurt, and it can cause division. One of the things that will destroy a group like this and hurt our influence in the community is the G word. gossip. It's when we get to know each other just enough to accidentally let dirty laundry slip, which should never happen, but we're human, aren't we? And we let that happen, and that contaminates our influence on the world around us. And we need to be really careful about that. But we want to make sure that those kind of things aren't what destroy our influence in the community, because that's our job. You know, that's what we're here for. We are the picked to go out and be salt of the earth. You know, that's a big responsibility. But we want to make sure we're not contaminated. We want to make sure we're not diluted. We make sure that we haven't lost our flavor, and then basically we're just rocks and fish bones and little pieces of shell and stuff like that left over after the salt dissolves, or all of the goodness has gone out of what we're made of. Comment on that. I lectured a whole lot tonight. I'd apologize, but I won't.
A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump.
What's
So I said, the Bible says, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, which means that if we let one rumor go, let's say it's about me, and it's true, but it's, like you said, it's the dirty laundry.
Right.
Even if it's true, we shouldn't go around telling everybody, you know what happened?
See what Charlie did?
David let Charlie talk the whole time.
What was the old test we used to use? And I learned this in VBS when I was a kid. Is it necessary? Is it nice? You know, I mean, it might be the truth. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it nice? That was the three-point test, right? So it can be true, as you said, but it's not necessary to tell anybody about it. It's certainly not nice to cast that shadow on somebody. That's just something that can really poison a group. And we've had it really good for a long time here. We have a good, wonderful group of Christian folks here, I believe. And I've been here for longer than I care to say, longer than some of you have been alive. And I've seen it go through change. You know, I've seen it's a completely different group here, except for Horace and Betty. And they've seen it change over a bunch of times, haven't you? I mean, I've seen this group change probably 3 or 4 times in its entirety, except for just a couple. And I've seen in the past where one little thing can really poison what goes on, and we need to be so careful about that, because everybody around us here on this neighborhood, they know who we are. They see us. We say hi to them when we're mowing the lawns and cleaning off the roof and the gutters and things like that. They watch the building for us when we're not here. They call us if there's a problem, and we've got good neighbors here. But they can see and sense when there's problems going on, if there is. So, you know, and we're human and things can happen. You know, we pray that they don't, and that if they do, that we can fix them quickly. And all of those things are usually what? Besides senseless. They're usually based on opinion instead of scripture. And we've been so blessed not to have to deal with that for a long time. We've got 2 quick comments and 1.5 minutes left. So, there you go. We'll pass it on. Give preference to one another, brotherly love. That's what that was.
I was just thinking it's so very important that we strive really hard to keep our influence in a positive direction, that we are exemplifying Christ in our life, because when we don't, or when we slip, which we will do, and we should get up, but it's so important that it's not just your life that you could be destroying. Well, not could be. It's not just your life, your spiritual life that you're hurting, but it's the people around you.
It spreads. That little leaven spreads, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the people around you.
Yeah, very good. Ludwig, and then that'll be our last comment there. Button up. There we go. Not button up, button up.
So I just wanted to say that it's important that we keep our purity. I would say at this moment in my life, I feel that I've been bombarded by ideas that are very against to my Christian belief. And sometimes I feel that the world is actually doing that purposely.
It is.
And exactly, right? So I think it's super important that we keep the purity of what we believe, because there's a lot of ideas that we get from what we call education that is trying to poison us into believing things that they think is the truth. Right. And we know that that's not the case. However, I've been in environments where I might be the only grain of salt. And I find that to be very difficult because I feel deluded. I feel, I'm the only crazy guy in this area. And
I know how you feel. I only laugh because I stood in those shoes.
So to me, I think it's important, this warning that Jesus told us, be aware of where you are. And no matter where you are, make sure you stay pure. Because
Absolutely.
in that way, once you, keep your purity, you'll be able to be contagious in the faith.
Very good. Well said. Well said. I thank you all for your time and for listening to me rattle for an hour and 15 minutes, dealing with my slide that didn't work for a few minutes. No, I thank you very much. I appreciate the comments and everything in the discussion. And I hope this has been valuable to you, just to plant seeds of thought so that you guys can carry on and continue your own study on this. We didn't touch the hem of the garment that we could have on all this. I tried to just limit to 1 or 2 scriptures per thing. There's a lot more out there. So good thing for you to study on your own and to be aware of the leaven, the bad leaven, and make sure that you are the good leaven in the world around you. I think we can learn about that. Let's have a quick word of prayer. The kids will be coming down in just a second. Thank you so much, Father, for blessing us today with our presence here. We appreciate our health, and we thank you for the lessons that you give us in your word and the examples, and we thank you so much for your word. Help us to grow and be more like you, and help us to not lose our influence in the world around us by silly little things. We ask, Father, that you'd help us to be aware of how we look to the world around us, and not in a vain way, Father, but so that we just don't want to taint your image at all. We want to give you glory in everything that we do. Bless us as we continue through this, and may the children that come here learn and be prepared to face life in the future with a little bit extra knowledge of you and the power and the love that you share in the world around us. In Jesus' name, amen. They'll be coming in. Here they come.
Salt. Everybody knows everything about salt.
Too much. In fact, it's almost as if I salted.
Yeah, it's salty.
You know what happens when you load sodium chloride into a shotgun? Salt is a deadly weapon. I didn't say that before.
Hello, hello, hello. Day 4 has come to an end. One more day. One more day. Tomorrow is a special day. The students, each class, will have a presentation. So, then they will receive a certificate and a goodie bag. But if they don't want the goodie bag, they can give it to me. We really enjoy all of you being here. Appreciate you supporting our Vacation Bible School. It's really been wonderful having you here. Okay, students, we are. There we go. All right. There we go. Okay. And what did we learn today? That's a new one. I learn something every day. So what does salt do? What does salt do? What about some of those classes in the back? Okay. Very good, very good. So, one more thing. Tell me one more thing. Salt adds flavor. Salt adds flavor. All right. All right. So, one more day. One more day. Thumbs up. All right. I appreciate you. All right. Okay, so we're going to have some more songs and then we'll be dismissed. But right after our closing prayer, we have another celebration. We had another birthday. And we want to definitely sing happy birthday to him. And actually, the Cooks were celebrating their wedding anniversary today. Okay. Song leaders.
Welcome back, everyone. The first song is The Happier We'll Be. The more
songs that will praise him, the more we will sing, the happier we'll be. The more we help others, help others, help others, the more we help others, the happier we'll be. We'll help them and show them we care all about them. The more we help others, the happier we'll be.
deep and wide. I had trouble with this last time. I'll have to have some help from everyone. Thank you, Joe. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. And wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. And wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. There's a fountain flowing. There's a fountain flowing. There's a fountain flowing. There's a fountain flowing. There's a flowing. There's a deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Thank you for keeping me straight on that. Next one is day one, day one. Day one, God made light when there was none. Day one, God made light when there was none. Day two, God made clouds and skies of blue. Day two, God made clouds and skies of blue. Day three, God made flowers, grass, and trees. Day three, God made flowers, grass, and trees. Day four, sun and moon and stars galore. Day four, sun and moon and stars galore. Day five, God made birds and fish alive. Day five, God made birds and fish alive. Day six, God made animals and men that day. Day six, God made animals and men that day. Day seven, God he rested in his heaven. Day seven, God he rested in his heaven. One we've already done this week. Wise man built his house on the rock. Wise man built his house upon the rock. A wise man built his house upon the rock. A wise man built his house upon the rock. And the rain came tumbling down. Oh, the rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. And the wise man's house stood firm. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. And the rains came tumbling down. Oh, the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. And the foolish man's house went splash. So build your life on the Lord Jesus Christ. Build your life on the Lord Jesus Christ. Build your life on the Lord
Be as loud as you can on the last booster. Booster, booster, be a booster. Don't be grouchy like a rooster. Booster, booster, be a booster. And boost our Bible school. That's pretty loud. Good job. That's, well, now it's up for it.
Let us bow in prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, we are so grateful, Father, for this time that we was able to come together and to have fellowship with one another, and Father, to share the lesson in the classes with these young kids. Father, we pray your blessings upon them. We ask, Father, that you would be with the teachers and help them, Father, to help these students to learn more about Jesus Christ, your Son. Father, as we prepare to go our separate ways, we ask, Father, that your guiding hand will be upon us and that you would keep us in your care. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Hold it. So it's Matthew Abruzio's birthday. So we want to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.